Welcome to Echoes of the Past, where history isn't just old, it's oddly fascinating.
From forgotten facts to bizarre backstories, we dig into the dusty corners of time
So
so
you
you
don't
don't
have
have
to.
to.
I'm Jody Lynn, your amateur historian and full-time trivia hoarder.
And I'm Ephraim here for the facts and the fun.
Let's rewind the clock and press play on the past. So let's start our journey in England and Scotland, where fear of witches and the devil sparked some of the most infamous trials and executions in British history.
And it's impossible to talk about witch hunts in these lands without mentioning King James VI of Scotland and later James I of England, a man who helped turn suspicion into law.
So we're going to look at witch persecutions in England and Scotland, and when it started was in the late 1500s and late 1400s. So witch persecutions in England and Scotland began to rise in the late 1400s, but the true wave of trials began in earnest in the late 1500s, fueled by religious conflict, political instability, and fear of the devil's influence. The most intense period was from 1590s to the 1650s, overlapping with periods of war, plague, and famine. Now, in charge was King James the 6th and 7th, and they played a key role. After surviving a storm at sea that he blamed on witchcraft, he became obsessed with rooting out witches. In 1597, he published the Demonology.
Demonology. It's just another way of spelling demon. It's weird.
My brain was not reading that.
Yeah.
Also, excuse us, it is 1:00 in the morning. This is a book that detailed how to identify, try, and execute witches. Local courts and magistrates conducted trials, often with encouragement from church authorities. Accusations often started with neighbor disputes, failed crops, sudden deaths, or unexplained illnesses. Midwives, healers, and older women were especially vulnerable during this time. And of course, proof only included finding a witch's mark, a mole, or a blemish believed to be the devil's mark. The swimming test, which accused witches were bound and thrown into water, floating meant guilt, because, physics. And of course, torture, especially in Scotland, was used to extract confessions. How many were killed? Well, in Scotland, about 2,500 to 3,000 people were executed, proportionally one of Europe's highest rates. And in England, around 500 were executed. Trials were less frequent and genuinely less deadly. Some notable cases were North Berwick trials from 1590 to 1592, where dozens were accused of trying to kill King James via storm magic. Torture and forced confessions led to executions. And then the Pendle witch trials of 1612 in England, 12 were accused, 10 executed, and this was one of England's most famous cases. The witch hunts faded out in the early 1700s. The 1735 Witchcraft Act effectively ended legal witch hunting by criminalizing the act of accusing someone of witchcraft, shifting focus to fraudsters who claimed magical powers. The Enlightenment brought growing skepticism toward superstition, and legal reforms required stronger evidence in trials. Of course, witch hunts in Britain were deeply tied to gender bias. About 85% of those accused were women, often poor or marginalized, and the hunts reflected broader anxieties about social change, religion, and power struggles.
While the witch trials in Britain left deep scars, what happened across the Channel in Germany and the Holy Roman Empire was even deadlier, and often even more brutal.
Let's take a look at how witch hunts unfolded in the heart of Europe. If England and Scotland's witch hunts were grim, the persecutions in Germany and the Holy Roman Empire were nothing short of catastrophic. This region saw some of the deadliest and most frenzied witch trials in history.
These weren't just isolated cases. Entire towns and regions were swept up in waves of accusations, torture, and mass extinctions. They started in the late 1400s in Germany. Most intense waves occurred between 1580 and 1650, particularly during the chaos of the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648. The witch trials were largely driven by local rulers, bishops, and secular courts. Each town or region could have its own wave of hysteria. Religious tensions between Protestants and Catholics also fueled accusations as communities sought to root out evil. The publication of the infamous manual Malleus Maleficarum by 1487 by Inquisitors Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Springer gave legal and religious backing to the witch hunts, spreading fear across Europe. Confessions obtained through torture were central to trials. Once accused, few escaped conviction. Accusations were often linked to causing crop failure, plagues, or storms, alleged pacts with the devil, sabotage of churches, or harming livestock. The evidence could include witch marks, confession under duress testimony, or testimonies from neighbors. Estimates vary, but scholars suggest between 25,000 people to 50,000 people were executed in the German-speaking lands. Some of the largest mass trials occurred in Wurzburg, 1626 to 1631, 1630, and Bamberg from 1626 to 1631, where hundreds were burned, including children, nobles, and clergy.
No, not the clergy.
Some notable cases: the Bamberg trials, nearly 1,000 executed. Records show detailed accounts of torture and forced confessions. And the Wurzburg trials, entire families wiped out. At one point, the Prince Bishop of Wurzburg admitted he was unsure who would be left in his domain if the executions were continued. The witch craze began to subside in the late 1600s as Enlightenment ideas spread, emphasizing reason and evidence over superstition. Legal reforms made it harder to convict without credible proof, and the devastation of endless executions began to horrify even those in power. Some extra details: the German witch trials had no mercy for status. Even mayors, priests, judges could find themselves accused if hysteria reached its peak. The use of witch prisons, entire facilities built to detain and torture the accused, was common in Bamberg and other cities. Those were dark days indeed, and speaking of ways to restore and recharge after facing terrors of history, let's take a quick break to talk about our sponsor.
After diving into some of the darkest chapters of history, we could all use a little magic potion to restore ourselves. And that's where our sponsor comes in.
We're proud to be sponsored by Dubby, the energy drink that's rewriting the rules. And if you want something that feels like it came straight out of medieval alchemist labs, you got to try their Oda's Restore Potion flavor. No witchcraft required.
It's packed with clean energy, no sugar, no artificial dyes, and absolutely no crashes. Just jitter-free focus, perfect for researching, gaming, or surviving a history rabbit hole.
Check it out at w.gg and use our code Echoes of the Past for 10% off of your order. That's w.gg, code Echoes of the Past. Go grab your Restore Potion today.
And I'm just saying, after having it for 2 weeks, that shit is bomb. It is so good.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we head to France, a country where witch trials flared up alongside political intrigue, religious tension, and local feuds.
While France may not have seen the same massive death toll as Germany, the trials were still brutal and awfully deeply tied to struggles for power.
I want to stop and say this real quick. We are laughing at the fact that we are doing this at 1 o'clock in the morning, and apparently can neither of us read. And we are not laughing at the subject at hand. I promise. Okay. So, looking at the witch hunts in France, which began in the 15th century, picking up momentum in the late 1500s and early 1600s, especially in border regions like Lorraine and Franche-Comté. I'm going to say this, Comté. The peak of the witch craze coincided with the wars of religion from 1562 to 1598, when Catholic-Protestant tensions were at their height. Witch trials in France were driven by local courts rather than a single national effort. Both secular and ecclesiastical judges had jurisdiction depending on the region. The Catholic Church's influence varied. Some clergy encouraged witch hunts, others tried to curb the worst excesses. Now, how the convictions worked were accusations were often linked to alleged pacts with the devil, because why not? Claims of weather magic, blaming witches for hailstorms or droughts, and harmed livestock or children. And of course, torture was widely used to secure confessions. And the accused were often poor women, healers, or people living on the margins of society. France's witch hunts likely claimed thousands of lives. Estimates vary between 3,000 and 5,000. The toll was highest in eastern and rural areas where local feuds could quickly escalate into mass hysteria. Some notable cases are the Loudon possessions in 1630, a sensational case where a group of Ursuline nuns claimed to be possessed by demons sent by the town priest Urbain Grandier. Grandier was accused of sorcery, tortured, and burned at the stake in 1634. Historians see this as a mix of religious hysteria, political intrigue, and personal vendettas. Then you had the Lubord witch trials in 1609. Hundreds were arrested in the Basque region under Judge Pierre de la Croix, who claimed witches threatened Christian order. Many were executed or tortured. By the late 1600s to early 1700s, skepticism about witchcraft grew, thanks to enlightened thinking and legal reforms. The Parliament of Paris increasingly overturned local witchcraft convictions, and in 1682, Louis XIV's government declared that magic and witchcraft did not exist, marking the official end of the hunts. The French hunts were marked by regional variation. While some areas saw deadly panics, others barely participated. And of course, the connection between witchcraft trials and political scapegoating was strong. Rivals or outcasts often became easy targets during unstable times.
France's witch trials became, or France's witch, France's, the French,
the French.
France's witch trials blended superstition with politics, creating tragedies that still echo today. But across the ocean, a new world would see its own deadly witch panic.
Let's head to Colonial America and the infamous witch hunts that shaped its early history. And of course, when people think of witch hunts, one place almost always comes to mind: Salem. But the witch persecutions in colonial America were part of a larger, complex story of fear, faith, and fragile communities.
And while Salem's trials became the most infamous, other colonies also saw accusations, trials, and executions, all fueled by the harsh realities of colonial life. The witch accusations in America began in the 1640s, decades before Salem. Then the most notorious period was in Salem, Massachusetts, 1692 to 1693. Earlier cases occurred in Connecticut, Massachusetts Bay, and other colonies.
We should not do this late anymore.
Trials were conducted by colonial magistrates and courts, heavily influenced by Puritan religious leaders. In Salem, the court of Oyer and Terminer was set up specifically to deal with the outbreak of accusations. How many people were killed in Salem, or how convictions worked. Convictions were based on spectral evidence, claims that the cursed spirit or specter appeared and harmed the victim, witch marks found on the body, confessions often obtained under duress or psychological pressure, testimonies from afflicted girls and neighbors. The accused were often women. Some men were tried, especially those who were outspoken, widowed, or socially marginalized. In Salem, 20 people were executed, 19 hanged, 1 pressed to death, and 5 others died in prison. In Connecticut, from 1647 to 1663, about 11 people were executed, dozens more accused, imprisoned, or tried in other colonies. The notable cases, of course, the Salem witch trials, sparked by the strange behavior of several young girls and the community's growing fear of the devil. Spectral evidence allowed accusations with no physical proof, and Governor William Phipps dissolved the special court and forbade spectral evidence after his own wife was accused. Alice Young, 1647, the first recorded execution for witchcraft in the colonies in Connecticut. By 1693, public outrage and intervention by higher authorities ended the Salem trials. Spectral evidence was discredited. Judges and juries began to doubt the validity of the accusations. In later years, many involved in the trials expressed regret, and the compensation was paid to some families of the victims.
Well, that's at least nice of them.
Some extra details. The Salem witch trials had become a powerful symbol of mass hysteria, injustice, and the dangers of extremism. The event inspired countless books, plays, The Crucible, films, and TVs exploring themes of paranoia and scapegoating. We read the book. and watched the movie for The Crucible, and either my freshman year of high school or junior year of high school. I just don't remember which.
I feel like we had to, and I just kind of skimmed over it. I'm gonna be real honest.
The Salem trials may be the best known, but witch hunts were far from an American invention. In fact, they spread across the northern world, including the icy reaches of Scandinavia, where belief in magic and the devil collided in deadly ways.
Let's now journey to Scandinavia, where fear of witches turned communities against their own. Well, of course, while Scandinavia might conjure images of fjords and northern lights, the region has a dark history of witch persecutions that tore communities apart, especially in the 1600s.
Here, the hunts often focused on whether magic and pacts with the devil, and they left a lasting mark on folklore and law.
Witch trials began in Norway, Sweden, and Finland during the 1500s, but the most deadly period came in the 1600s, particularly the mid to late 1600s. Trials were overseen by local judges, church courts, and royal authorities, and in some cases, traveling commissions or specially appointed witch judges led mass trials. And accusations often focused on weather magic. Witches were blamed for storms at sea, crop failures, and harsh winters. Claims of kidnapping children to attend witches' sabbaths, alleged deals with the devil, or harming livestock. Confessions were frequently obtained under torture or intense pressure, and children were sometimes used as witnesses, particularly in Sweden. In Sweden, over 300 were executed, and same with Norway. In Finland, fewer but still notable trials took place. The Torsäker witch trials in Sweden in 1675 remain Scandinavia's largest mass execution for witchcraft, at 71 people beheaded and burned. This was also driven by a commission appointed by the church, and it was sparked by child testimonies claiming they'd been abducted to witches' gatherings, and the executions were carried out swiftly. Most victims were women. The other notable case is the Vardo witch trials in Norway in 1621 and 1662, accused mostly women, many from fishing communities, and blamed for storms that sank ships. These executions were carried out by burning. Witch trials in Scandinavia faded out by the early 1700s by growing skepticism, local or legal reforms, and public horror at the violence playing a role. By the mid-18th century, witchcraft was no longer seen as a serious criminal charge in most of the region. The Nordic hunts were closely tied to seafaring communities, where storms and shipwrecks often sparked new waves of accusations. Many of the accused were Sami people or others in the margins of society, reflecting ethnic and cultural prejudices.
I noticed a lot of the or reoccurring reasons why people were accused were the weather thing, witch marks, and just people just going, "Oh, they're a witch," without
100%.
without providing any evidence.
100%.
Not like they could.
Yeah, and what I don't understand is, like, using children, especially young children, as witnesses is retarded.
Yeah.
Now, I can understand if, like, that specifically happened to them, like, now, but that was back then. Like, there's no way.
Well, yeah, and if you use kids, they're going to be so scared that they might get in trouble for saying the wrong thing. So they're kind of pressured into being like, "Oh yeah, she's a witch."
Exactly.
The icy winds of fear eventually calmed in the north, but in Switzerland, the flames of persecution burned fiercely, leaving a trail of destruction in mountain villages and cities alike.
Let's head to the heart of Europe and explore the witch hunts of Switzerland. And of course, they might be known today for its peaceful neutrality, but in the 15th to 17th centuries, it was home to some of Europe's earliest and deadly witch hunts.
These persecutions were fueled by local tensions, religious divisions, and a fierce desire to root out what people saw as evil in their midst. Swiss witch hunts began in the early 1400s, making Switzerland one of the first regions to see widespread witch trials. The most intense period ran through the 1500s to the mid 1600s. Trials were driven by a mix of local secular courts and church authorities, and Switzerland's fragmented political structure with independent cantons and city-states meant that individual communities often acted on their own. Accusations were commonly tied to alleged weather magic, hailstorm floods, etc., claims of heresy or devil worship, causing disease or death in humans and animals. Torture was a routine part of an investigation. Confessions were often extracted after brutal interrogation. Neighbors, family members, and even children sometimes gave testimonies against the accused. Estimates suggest thousands were executed, especially in regions like
Elias, Vod.
Valais, Vaud, and parts of Jura. Some communities saw entire families wiped out, with trials spiraling into mass executions. Notable cases: the Valais witch trials, 1428 to 1447, one of the first large-scale witch hunts in Europe. Hundreds were burned at the stake after accusations of poisoning wells, harming crops, and conspiring with the devil. The Lausanne and Vaud trials in the 16th century, waves of executions targeting alleged witches blamed for everything from storms to plague outbreaks. By the late 1600s, Swiss witch trials began to wane. The spread of Enlightenment ideas, legal reforms, and growing skepticism about confessions under torture helped bring prosecutions to an end. Switzerland's hunts were notable for their early start and their influence on other European witch hunting regions. Like elsewhere, women, especially healers, widows, and the poor, were the primary targets. The terror that swept Switzerland was a part of a wider European nightmare. But in some parts of the world, witchcraft persecutions didn't stop with the end of the witch craze. In fact, they still continue to this day.
Let's turn our attention to witch hunts in Africa, both historic and modern, where accusations can still have deadly consequences. And of course, while the European witch craze faded out centuries ago, witchcraft accusations in parts of Africa have deep historical roots, and in many places, they're still very much a dangerous reality today.
These persecutions blend traditional beliefs, colonial influence, and the modern struggles, creating a complex and sometimes deadly mix.
Belief in witchcraft and sorcery predates colonialism across much of Africa, often tied to traditional religions and local justice systems. European colonial powers introduced formal witchcraft laws or reinforced local beliefs, blending indigenous practices with imported witch hunting models during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Modern witch hunts continue today in many African countries. Historically, accusations were handled by local chiefs, elders, or spiritual leaders. During colonial rule, some courts enforced anti-witchcraft laws. Today, witch hunts are often led by communities, vigilante groups, or traditional healers, sometimes with tacit approval from local authorities. Accusations typically arise when someone suffers misfortune from illness, death, crop failure, infertility, a child dies suddenly, natural disasters strike. Of course, methods of proving witchcraft vary, from divination rituals, confessions under duress, and physical signs like a birthmark or unusual behavior. The accused individual, often women, children, elderly people, or the disabled, may be, exiled, attacked, or killed. Precise numbers are hard to confirm, but human rights groups report thousands of deaths linked to witchcraft accusations across Africa in the past few decades. Modern hotspots include parts of Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Some notable cases are Tanzania, where elderly women, especially those with red eyes, a sign of age or cooking over smoky fires, have been targeted. Estimates suggest hundreds are killed each year. Ghana, so-called witch camps house women accused of witchcraft, offering refuge from mob violence but isolating them from their communities. In Nigeria, in some regions, children are accused of being witches and subjected to abuse, abandonment, or worse. Witchcraft accusations often provide a way for communities to explain misfortune in places with limited access to healthcare, education, or legal protection. Political, economic, and social pressures, including poverty and conflict, fuel modern hunts, and weak legal protections or complicity by officials allow violence to continue unchecked. There are ongoing efforts by human rights organizations and governments to combat witch hunts through education, legal reforms, and community outreach, but challenges remain.
The tragedy is that for many, the witch hunt isn't history. It's a dangerous part of the present. But as we close this chapter, let's take a moment to reflect on the broader legacy of these persecutions and how they shaped modern views of justice, gender, and fear.
All right, let's move into looking at how the dark history of witch hunts has found its way into pop culture, in films, TV shows, and even games that help keep these stories alive in new forms.
Whether as cautionary tales, horror stories, or historical dramas, the witch hunts continue to inspire powerful storytelling.
So let's first look at movies. The Witch in 2015 is a haunting film set in 1600s New England, showing how paranoia and religious zeal can tear a family apart. It's rooted in real fears and beliefs of colonial America.
Oh, real quick, the guy who directed Nosferatu,
Mm-hmm.
he also directed this movie, The Witch.
Really?
Yes. He also directed the Lighthouse with Willem Dafoe and the I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy who was Edward in the Twilight movies.
Yes. You said that.
Robert Patterson.
Yeah,
That's his name.
I could see his face, and that was it. The next one we have is Haxen in 1922, a silent Swedish-Danish film blending documentary and horror to explore the history of witchcraft and the hysteria surrounding it. Then you've got The Crucible in 96, based on Arthur Miller's play, dramatizing the Salem witch trials as an allegory for McCarthyism, but deeply grounded in historical events. My brain wanted to say something completely different. Season of the Witch in 2011, a fantasy action film with a backdrop of medieval Europe's witch persecutions, though with plenty of Hollywood embellishment.
TV shows: Salem from 2014 to 2017, a fictionalized supernatural take on the Salem witch trials.
Fantastic TV show, by the way.
Where real witchcraft is part of the story. American Horror Story Coven, 2013, blends historical references like witch hunts and voodoo traditions with modern witch narratives.
Also a good one.
And The Burning Times from 1990, a Canadian documentary that explores the European witch hunts, focusing on the role of patriarchy and religion in persecuting women.
Next, let's look at a few games. Blasphemous is a dark, atmospheric game inspired by Spanish Inquisition imagery, including witch-like figures and brutal religious persecution.
It's a pretty good game.
I've heard. The Witcher series, of course. While not strictly about witch trials, the games often deal with themes of fear, superstition, and the persecution of those seen as other. And Pentiment from 22, a narrative RPG set in 16th century Bavaria where players navigate the complex religious and political tensions of the time, including witchcraft accusations.
In Fallout 4, you can go to, since it's set in Boston, you can go up to the Museum of Witchcraft.
Oh, yeah, you can.
And it's a museum. You go through the basement, and it's all like creepy and spooky and whatever. And then when you get upstairs, they'll like very poorly show like scenes of the witch trials, I guess, with like the mannequins and whatever. Like I said, it's very poor. And there's a death claw in there that you fight.
I remember that now that you say the death claw, yeah. Because they kind of hint at it, and then they're like, you should go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you just pay attention to the holotapes that you find on the gunners' corpses, they one of the one who's recording it, I think, mentions that they're being followed by something, but they can't figure out what. And then that's when they get backed up into the Museum of Witchcraft and absolutely murdered by the Deathclaw.
Yeah.
From haunting films to eerie games, it's clear that these dark chapters of history still capture our imagination and serve as warnings about what fear and suspicion can do to a society.
Let's take a moment now to reflect on what we've explored and to share our appreciation for you, our listeners, who help us keep these stories alive. What a journey through some of history's darkest and most complex moments. From Europe to Africa, we've seen how fear, superstition, and power shaped the terrible witch hunts and how their echoes still resonate today.
We want to sincerely thank each and every one of you for listening and supporting Echoes of the Past. Your curiosity and passion fuel our deep dives into history's mysteries and forgotten stories.
And we've got some exciting news. Starting soon, we'll be releasing 2 episodes a week. That means more history, more stories, and more fascinating topics coming your way.
Our next episode will continue this thread, exploring the chilling history of the occult and the satanic panic, a wild chapter of fear and misunderstanding that shaped the recent decades.
So buckle up, because the past is never done surprising us. Thanks again for being part of the journey. Until next time, let's keep listening, keep learning, and keep looking for those echoes of the past. And of course, lastly, I want to remind you that Echoes of the Past is more than just a podcast, it's a community.
That's right. If you have any fascinating stories you want to share, sponsorship opportunities to discuss, or topic ideas you think we should explore, we'd love to hear from you.
Just send us an email at echoesofthepast.pod@gmail.com, and we'll read every message and can't wait to connect with you.
Your input helps shape the show, and who knows, your suggestion might be the next episode we dive into. Thank you for wandering through history with us on Echoes of the Past.
If you liked what you heard, subscribe, rate us, and tell that one friend who still quotes fun facts at parties.
And remember, history may repeat itself,
but we promise not to.
See you in the next Echo.